Mrs. Mary Simpson, dear friend, amazing artist, a painter, but also a writer. And I'll let her say anything else.
We met as activists, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Hmm.
That is true.
Yeah.
And when the world changed a bit.
Yeah, the world is changing. The world is still changing.
Yeah. So Mary has gratefully agreed to give some feedback on some questions that I have about uh, living the School of Life art school.
I
Uh,
love that you're doing the free art school. I think it's a perfect idea right now.
I like really want to be more in touch with other people, and this seemed like a good way. And also, I have a lot of little things to share that I don't know where else to put them. Like 10 years ago, I was in between art galleries and looking for a new one, and the longtime framer I had worked with said, "Oh, I'll offer to tell you which of my clients pay their bills on time, and which ones are good companies from the back end." Which
That's
I
good
did.
advice.
Yeah, I didn't take him up on it, but it was a good reminder to, if you're researching something, how to triangulate and find another source of information, not just what someone's trying to sell you.
Yeah, talk to some of the artists that they represent if you can and see if they pay their artist bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the important things you've learned outside formal education that are surprising or most important that you'd like to share?
Lately I've been learning from younger people who I think do this really well. And I wish I'd known when I was younger. When you talk about your work, to speak from your own context and not the place of the gatekeepers of the art world who are at the center. And it's something, when I went through art school, I was trained, I make abstract paintings, and I was trained to talk about my process, to talk about my form, to talk about where I fit within the larger context art historically, and to prove how certain theoretical frameworks apply to my work. And so that's all I did for years. And now I look back at those years and I look at my artist statements and I wonder, what the fuck? Where is my activism? Where's my narrative trauma? Where's all the obsessive, weird, fascinating elements that actually go into making my work? Where it really comes from. Um, my theory now is that the center of the art world is winning at capitalism. They're way more rich than we are, but they're totally losing at imagination. And I think they are terrified of their own irrelevancy. They're actually not irrelevant. I think they're not relevant thinkers anymore. Whereas if you were making your work and speaking from your center and not their center, you are going to have relevancy within your work. And that's the place to speak to. I think that there's a fear that you're going to be accused of navel gazing, which is a very classic insult that the center, which is mostly white, mostly male, will accuse a lot of people who are not mostly white and not mostly male. But it's so much more interesting. That's where that's the source of my work. And it's something that I've learned from younger generations who seem to be waking up to this, that we don't have to do that anymore.
I think what's really interesting is like when that mindset of the center that you describe, no matter how who the person is, what their background is, you can buy into that mindset and replicate it.
Yeah, you can adopt, that's how survival and capitalism works, right? You adopt the framework of the dominant culture, and it can take you a while to step back and recognize, like, wow, I'm actually not making work from this place. And speaking to what you're actually doing and not hiding it can be really powerful. And I think I think viewers and readers are really receptive to speaking from that place now. And I think that's what's terrifying to the gatekeepers, that they can't keep up with that part.
Okay, my next question is about dealing with rejection and disappointment
Oh, yes.
and how to do self-care after a big project.
Eat potato chips by yourself in a closet is what you do. I'm actually serious about that. But secondly, I really think the biggest thing with rejection, and actually this deals with self-care, with when you have a show or where you get something that you want also, is that you have to maintain a sense of your own self-worth that is not related to your achievements. That might sound counterintuitive, but you absolutely have to have unshakable faith in your work. You build a sense of self-worth from keeping a connection to your practice that satisfies you, and a sense of self-worth from being kind to the people that you love. And if you have that, you have unshakable faith in your work, and you have self-esteem from connecting to other people, then rejection is just part of the game and it can't touch you. It's going to sting. You can go eat potato chips by yourself in the closet, just like for an hour. But rejection is just part of it, happens to all of us. It's just part of the game. And if you have that faith in your work, it's going to be fine.
Oh, that's great. That is well said. And I think allowing yourself that scheduled time for the indulgent moment, like
Yes, to wallow. You can wallow just for a little bit.
put a
And
cap on it, like decide like I'm gonna wallow for an hour or a week or something, and then
depending on like
go.
how big is the rejection and how much did you want it, it could be an hour, or I would say up to a week, but beyond a week, get out of bed.
Don't fight the wallow, just do it. Indulge in
Do
it.
it.
Get
Let it
done.
taste good.
Yeah.
Like the chips.
Then it's more easy to move on from it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, Mary, this is amazing. Thank you.
So you were asking about self-care after a show ends, and I actually have learned to try to preempt the show ending postpartum by dealing with the sense of vulnerability when your show is up.
Oh, interesting. How do you mean?
Well, do you remember seeing those old, really, really old school cartoons, like from the early 20th century, that would have like a baby in a pair of red pajamas, and the back of those pajamas would have two little buttonholes that would always fall down, and you can see the baby's ass?
Yeah. Yes.
That is how when I have a show up, like I'm walking around in those pajamas and my ass is hanging out. It is so vulnerable. And that anxiety, I've narrowed it down to, is this show going to sell anything? Because, part of showing our work is the survival, the literal daily survival of selling it. And is the show going to get any press? And those are two things that as an artist, you just don't have control over. So it's really intense to feel anxiety from those things. So what I do instead is try to put those anxieties on my coat rack and invite my friends who are really important to me. My friends are important to me, and their opinion is important to me. And it's important that my friends see my work. So I invite my friends to see my show with me and talk about the work one-on-one while it's up. And then when my show comes down, I have this feeling that people saw my work and that I got to get feedback from them and understand what they think of it and have like this really lovely shared experience. So I'm not left with that horrible, vulnerable, did anybody see it? Nobody wrote about it, nothing sold, into the black hole of depression. It like staves it off.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's what's most meaningful for an artist is having that dialogue with peers about
Yeah. And that sense that like I did this thing and people came and they showed up for me and they saw it. We talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever had strange, unexpected emotional turmoil from something really good happening professionally?
Yes. Have you ever hooked up with a crush and discovered that they're a terrible kisser?
Yeah, probably.
We'll talk about who it was later. I make the comparison because getting what you want should feel good. Just like really simply, it should just feel good. And often it doesn't. And I think when it doesn't, that's information for you. Is it about yourself and your anxieties, or is it something in whatever you got that isn't a good fit? It's something that you can examine and make decisions from later on, like not making out with someone who's a bad kisser.
Like, how do you deal with feelings about making money from your artwork?
I'm so glad you asked this question. It's the the question is valid, but the thinking of trying to compartmentalize making your work versus making money from your work is a capitalist trap. And I say that because this is something I really believe in. Part of my practice lately has been activism around money, sometimes with taxes, sometimes just with running a business as an artist. The idea that artists should be heroic and make work for art's sake, art for art's sake, is centuries old. It goes back to, artists in the 1700s making work under control of the state and control of patrons. And it means that for centuries, artists have been underpaid. And it's interesting to me that the art world, the contemporary art world that we operated in, brings together people of extreme wealth and extreme poverty all the time. We bump up against each other, and we pretend that both sides are interested in art from this heroic place, art for art's sake. But the people with severe amounts of money are not just interested in art for art's sake, and the people who really need the money to survive. And I think it's really important for us to talk about it. I think this idea that we make art just for the sake of making art is something that helps keep most of us locked in if not poverty, then a hustling mentality where we're always trying to have side businesses just to survive. And then in the meantime, our artwork prices will be getting knocked down. Our stipends for giving lectures or writing for publications will get knocked down. I know when I was teaching at Columbia in the 2010s, the adjunct pay hadn't been raised in the visual arts program since the 1990s. This is part of the way that capitalism survives, is by undercutting the classes below it. And I think the art world absolutely has it. And when I think about my own philosophy for making money on my work, I think, God, if I could make a ton of money from my work, I would absolutely do it. I don't know how. Like if I could write a best-selling novel, I would do it. I have no idea how to do that. I probably never will. But if we could somehow take that magic pill and figure out how to market our work and sell it on a mass scale and make $1 billion, we absolutely would. And I want to start to unchain this idea that it's more noble and heroic that to not make money from your work. I think let your work leave the studio and give it a little blessing and say, please don't come back, and generate more sales. Like just do it.
Psychotic feelings if I see things of mine out that have been sold out in the wild. I'm like, that's mine. I am taking it back. It's coming back
I
to
mean,
me.
sometimes you have that connection to a
Oh, I have
piece.
that about all of them. I'm like, what the fuck is this doing here? This is mine.
Sometimes I make something and I feel so divorced from it that I'm like, please don't let that come back.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
want it.
that's good.
And
That's
it's so awesome that somebody wants to hang it on their wall. I love it.
maybe I'll get there someday. Oh yeah, the next one is about dealing with insulting, patronizing comments in the
Yeah.
moment. I'm curious about like chronic frustration, undervaluing, or people are like trying to be nice, but they say something really quick that they don't think about, but it's a common sort of shortcut when talking about your work or something. Just maybe the answer is really simple, but just wonder if you have any thoughts on dealing with that.
Yes, I do. If it's if somebody's really meaning to be nice, then you can be graceful. Here, I've memorized these things.
Mm.
So if somebody is being nice and let's say they ask a question, but you think they're just like coming from an uninformed place or whatever, tilt your head and say, why do you ask?
Mm.
And just do that and put it back on them, because it forces them in the moment to more thoughtfully consider what it is that they're asking and to give you more information. And then you can respond from there. I think the goal is to not launch into some kind of dynamic that is either taking care of their feelings or feeling defensive by yourself. If they say a comment that is a little bit more biting and you're not sure if they're being nice, they might actually be starting to be an asshole, which happens to women a lot. Give them a long, wow, huh, and then just change the subject.
Hmm.
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 And then my final one, if they're really, really, really being a jerk, I just say, you know what, this train is really crowded. I'm just going to catch the next one. And I end the conversation.
Wow, it's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I think the goal is to If they're really being a jerk, shut it down.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then just keep asking them questions to give some more context for what they're really talking about. Give some, that's the grace space, is to just, why
Yeah.
do you ask?
But I feel like you would have a ton to say about dealing with formal contracts and managing either assistants or collaborators or institutions.
I do. Funny thing about the art world is that most galleries hate formal contracts. I think they're becoming more common, but traditionally they just haven't. And I think when you're younger, given that they're not very common, there's not a lot to worry about. The one thing is when you first start showing your work, you might think you would never forget what you give a gallery. But the truth is that galleries can hang on to work for years and you forget what you've given them. So the one thing you always want is a consignment agreement. And on that consignment agreement, here are the things you can ask for. Ask that they pay for shipping and insurance and photography being documentation of your work and documentation of the show. They should pay for those things. Tell them that framing needs to be reimbursed back to you before they take their sales cut if it's sold. You can even ask how they feel about adding the framing charge onto the sales price to be reimbursed by the collector, or maybe they just want to build that into the price, but have a conversation about how framing will be paid for. And then you want to lay out the terms for sharing a discount. So a lot of galleries will share up to a 20% discount. If that's too much for you, you can ask that they share just 15% and then call you if they think they want to go to 20 or 25% to get that sale over the line. When they call you, you can say, I'm actually, this piece was really expensive for me to produce. I really can't share more than 15%. And they can still sell it for 25%, but then they're taking that extra 10% off of their end. That's a nice, clear conversation to have.
I think that's really important about what you said about thinking that you won't forget what you've given to a gallery. And I
Mm.
early on worked with some that were very good about keeping records for me and others that weren't necessarily. And I have a vague memory of a couple things that I can describe on paper, but I have no picture, no inventory.
No record that it comes back. I
And they
also,
get,
I start to feel emotional about work that is sitting in a gallery's storage and they have no plan for it. I
mm,
really like getting that back from to my studio. It's like having your children out there being abandoned. It feels better to get it back after a while.
yeah.
Unless you can call and say, do you have a plan for this? Are there any sales? And if not, you can take it.
Also, if the gallery closes, you need to have a list of what you want
Yes.
back. Because
Oh, about working with other people.
oh
Is
yeah,
that your next question?
yeah, either collaborating or working with someone to help you.
Hmm. Um, very short answer.
Hmm.
Working with other people is 70% vibes, 30% skills. So the 70, if you imagine you're a bubble in a Venn diagram and your person you're working with is another bubble, you want to be almost overlapping in your vibes, that's 70%. And then the 30% of your skills and the 30% of their skills should be opposite. You should be working with someone whose skills are opposite yours. But those vibes
Mm-hmm.
are really important.
Oh, that's really powerful. Is there anything else that you have like learned on your journey as like a adult person managing your artist self?
Um,
You have, something you'd like to share?
well, just to go back to what I'll call the theme of my talk,
Yeah.
is back to this idea that the art world is run by capitalist losers. I really started to believe that.
Mhm.
Winning at capitalism, losing at imagination. It can be really difficult when we need, as artists, we make work and we need it to be seen. And we hopefully need it to be sold so that we can pay for our lives and continue to make work. This can lead us into the trap of feeling like we need to please those capitalist losers. And it's a trap. It's a losing game. We're never going to get there. So just make your work. Make your work and keep it weird. Do not worry about where you fit in the art world. You need your friends. You need to understand what you're obsessed with. Maybe you're obsessed with reading activist graphic novels. So become friends with the people who make activist graphic novels and get them engaged with your work and make that your circle and let it feed everything that you're making. but don't worry about fitting into the art world. Don't worry about trying to present yourself from that context ever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.